Okay, for question 3, we're asked to look at table 4, which shows the goals scored by Dunleary United in the last 15 matches played. We're asked to look at that table and create the appropriate frequency distribution based on the data, and then we're asked to create a histogram based on that. So you can see here that this data looks pretty meaningless as it stands. Now we copy it into Excel, and it's still very hard to tell. Even if you know what it represents, it's still quite hard to see a pattern there, to see really what's going on. So what we want to do is take each of the values in this table and count the occurrence of each one, and this gives us what's called a simple frequency distribution. Now again, when making the decision to create a simple frequency distribution as opposed to a grouped one, it should be pretty obvious. If the data is small, if there's a small number of data values, if the data values themselves are, if the range is small, then it would be pretty pointless to try and group those. Grouping them would just create more confusion. So in this case we'll stick to a simple frequency distribution. So that basically means what we want to do is go from the min value here up to the max value and create a column based on that. Now we also need column titles, and the first column title will always be whatever is being studied. So whatever is being surveyed, whether it be, I don't know, number of days taken off by employees in a company, or number of times school children bring lunch into school, or whatever is being surveyed, that title goes into the first column. So in this case it's number of goals scored. Make sure to add your titles, because without the titles this table is meaningless. The second column is always the frequency, and that is always basically, to get the frequency, what that represents, we look at each cell to see what each cell represents. Each cell in this case represents a match played. So this is our first match, 0 goals scored. Second match, 1 goal scored. Third match, 3 goals were scored, and so on. So we want to put some sort of order on that. So basically this should be, as I say, there's 15 of those, 15 cells. What each cell represents is a match. The content of each cell is basically the number of goals, in this case the number of goals scored. So matches. Okay, so just it's important to get the difference between these two titles. So number of goals scored in this case comes first. So it's always whatever is being studied or surveyed comes first, and then the frequency is your second column. Now to get the actual data values, we basically get the min and the max. Now it's pretty easy to do that in this case just by looking at it, but I'll just show you how to do it using Excel. And in an exam or a test of any sort, I would always use Excel. It's safer, and also it shows that you are able to use it. Use the function. So it's just equals min equals max. There's only one parameter in this case, so it's just open bracket, select the data. So you're getting the max of all that data. Close bracket, enter, and that gives you 6, as you probably could see immediately from looking at it. So here we go from 0 down to 6. We can just use autofill on that. And for the second column, again it's easy enough here to count this data. So if we look here, we can count the number of zeros, 1, 2, 3 zeros. However, in a test you will be expected to use an Excel function, and in this case I'm going to use the COUNTIF function because it fits quite nicely. What COUNTIF does is it doesn't just count all the cells with values in them, it counts all the cells with according to a particular criteria, and of course you have to give the function that criteria, to tell the function what criteria that is. So in this case, we go to equals COUNTIF, open bracket. You see here it's asking for two parameters, two pieces of information. So the first piece of information is the data, and then we always separate these with a comma, comma, criteria. In this case it's number of zeros, so we just click on the cell with 0 in it, just as easy, close bracket, and we have our value 3. Okay, now we could use autofill on this, but if we did that, because autofill automatically moves as we move across or down with the autofill function, basically in this case the B3 to B5 to F5 would go to B4 to F6, would go to B5 to F7, and so on, which isn't what we want. Now we want the B9 to remain relative address values. We want the B9 to go to B10, to go to B11, and so on. But we don't want the B3 to B5 to F5 to be to move. We want it to remain fixed. So to fix these values, to fix these addresses, sorry, we either put in dollar signs in front of each of the letters and the values, or we just can press F4 and it does it for us. Okay, we have to do that twice now because we also have to do it for the F5. So again, F4, and we're done. So now we just have to use autofill. So to use autofill, go to the bottom right, mouse cursor turns into a black cross, right mouse button, drag down, and fill without formatting, and that gives us the frequency of each of those values. So in the first case, the zero goals scored was in 3 matches, 1 goal scored in 3 matches, 2 goals scored in 2 matches, and so on. Okay. Now to create a histogram based on that, we select the data, or we could alternatively just create a blank column chart and then add in the data. In this case, select the data, go to insert column, and again you immediately should notice there that there should only be 1 column for each of these values along the horizontal. So for this first value here there should only be 1 column, for the second value there should only be 1. Unlike in the previous question 2, there was 3 categories, 3 employee types for each year. In this case there's only 1. You can see there's only 2 columns there. 1 represents the horizontal, the other represents the vertical. So we need to get rid of one of those columns, one of those series. So we right click, select data, and just figure out which one, and that's just done by data matching. So you can see here the red looks to be correct, so we get rid of the blue, which is series 1, and we're left with the red, which looks okay. And then we edit the horizontal axis labels, because you can see it's going from 1 to 7, whereas it should be going from 0 to 6. So 1 to 7 is just the default. And we're done there. Now we can get rid of the legend because there's only 1 series, so in that case it's pointless having a legend. And we do that again through layout, and we turn off the legend, put in the axis titles, put in the chart title. So chart title, goals scored over 15 matches, something similar to that. Okay. I really should make that O'Leary, I suppose. something like that. In this case, it should, the axis title always, the horizontal axis title always corresponds to the first column, so it's goals scored, and the vertical is always the frequency. Okay. And just to make it look like a histogram, if you want, we normally there are no gaps between the columns in histogram, so we can right click on one of the columns, all the columns become selected, we go format data series and bring the gap width down to 0%. Okay, and we're done.